You were never just attractive. You were never just confident. You were never just her type. She fell for something deeper, something she doesn't even understand, something she won't admit. And if you don't understand what that is, it'll destroy you. This is not a game. This is not another dating tip video. This is about truth. Brutal, raw, undeniable. Kind that pulls you out of delusion and smashes the lies that have kept you stuck. Most men are chasing love without knowing what love even means to a woman. You've been told to be nice. You've been told to be available. You've been told to just be yourself. And it failed. Every time. Because you were acting based on what you think she wants, not what actually pulls her in. This video is going to break that illusion. I'm going to show you the 3 reasons women truly fall in love with you. Not the fairy tale version, not what she posts on social media, not what society taught you, but the subconscious reasons that control everything she does. These are the reasons she chases you, craves you, obsessively watches your stories, stalks your life, feels like she's known you forever, and then, one day, resents you, because what she was in love with was never you. It was the version of herself you awakened. This is the truth. You can reject it, or you can take control of it, right now. Subscribe to this channel if you're ready to break free from illusion and help more men hear what the world is too scared to say. By subscribing, you help us keep giving away real insights that wake men up and help them realize the truth. Comment, I see through the illusion. Number 1, you mirror her missing self. She doesn't consciously know it, but every time she feels that magnetic pull toward you, it's not just chemistry, charm, or confidence. It's recognition, a deep, inexplicable inner acknowledgement that you carry something she lost, repressed, or never developed in herself. And this feeling, this unspoken familiarity, creates an emotional reaction that bypasses her logic and strikes her core identity, because inside every woman, beneath the roles she plays, the independent achiever, the good daughter, the trauma survivor, the boss, the perfectionist, there is an unseen part of her that's been waiting to exhale, a part that's suffocated under years of expectation, emotional labor, cultural scripting, and silent endurance. And when you show up, embodying grounded masculinity, not performative masculinity, but quiet, controlled, peaceful presence, you act as the catalyst to her unconscious longing for herself. You reflect to her a part of her she's never known how to fully access, a part she maybe only caught glimpses of in art, music, or fleeting moments of childhood wonder. And suddenly, your energy makes her feel like herself, or more accurately, who she imagines she could be if she was free from all the scripts and masks she's had to wear. And that experience isn't intellectual, it's somatic. It happens in her nervous system, in the way her breathing shifts when she's near you, in the way her guard softens for no reason, in the way her voice slows down or speeds up depending on whether her inner self feels safe or exposed. And that's why attraction at its deepest level is never really about your physical traits or material assets. Those are surface hooks that get filtered through something much more primal. The question of who you allow her to become in your presence. And if you don't know this, you'll be confused when her desire for you seems to come out of nowhere, or why it intensifies even when you say or do very little, because it's not about what you're doing. It's about what you're representing. And in the psychological framework of Carl Jung, this is the anima projection reversed. You're not projecting your feminine onto her. She's projecting her disowned masculine onto you, not the aggressive or hyper-dominant masculine that our culture glamorizes or vilifies, but the integrated masculine, the presence, the direction, the silence that holds space, the strength that doesn't need to overpower. And this kind of energy doesn't need to chase, convince, or seduce. It simply is. And because it's so rare, it becomes irresistible to the woman who's spent her life over-functioning, planning everything, managing everyone's emotions, being emotionally responsible for partners, family, and even society's expectations. So when she meets you and senses a man who is at peace within himself, a man whose energy doesn't demand or explain, but instead anchors the room, it feels like oxygen, like relief, like something she didn't even know she was suffocating without. And this is where the danger starts, because if she hasn't done her inner work, if she hasn't faced her own fragmentation, then she will cling to you not out of love, but out of need, psychological need. Not the kind she admits or even understands, but the kind that turns you from man into symbol, from symbol into solution, and from solution into savior. And the moment you accept that unconscious responsibility, you lose yourself. Because now, instead of standing in your truth and being witnessed by her, you're acting in a role for her. And this dynamic is a silent trap for many emotionally present men, especially those who have cultivated awareness and restraint, because they're naturally more sensitive to energy and emotions, and often mistake this magnetic connection for mutual depth. But what's really happening is a kind of emotional vampirism, where your groundedness becomes the source of her temporary stability. And while this feels like chemistry at first, it quickly becomes pressure, because suddenly you notice she's only calm when you're calm, she's only safe when you're present, and now you're no longer free to be human, to be upset, tired, uncertain, because if you show cracks, the illusion starts to unravel. And this is where Stoicism becomes more than a philosophy. It becomes a necessary boundary, not to become emotionally unavailable or cold, but to remain unaffected by external expectations, to remember that your role is not to complete her, but to be complete in yourself. And this is one of the hardest truths for men to embody, especially those who have developed empathy and emotional intelligence, because it feels cruel to watch someone spiral in your absence or disappointment. But it's not cruelty, it's clarity, and clarity is compassionate, because when you allow her to face her own shadows, you're respecting her capacity for growth, whereas when you constantly shield her from the emotional consequences of her own projections, you're enabling her illusion. And in the long term, this destroys both of you, because what begins as admiration turns into addiction, and then into resentment. She begins to feel like you're different now. But really, what's changed is that you stopped feeding the fantasy, and this is where most men collapse. They chase the old connection, try to recreate it, explain themselves, apologize for breaking the spell. But the truth is, the spell was never sustainable, because it was never built on two whole people. It was built on a mirror and a missing piece. And if you don't break this cycle, you'll keep repeating it with new faces, always wondering why intense beginnings lead to cold endings. But if you understand this, if you see that the initial attraction is often a reflection of unmet inner needs, you can still enjoy the connection without becoming consumed by it. And this is where Stoic presence becomes your power, not as a performance, but as a state of being. Because when you operate from your core, when your actions are dictated by principle, not reaction, by purpose, not validation, then even if she projects, clings, withdraws, or idealizes, you remain unmoved, not detached emotionally, but unshaken spiritually. And this doesn't mean you're unkind or unavailable. It means you don't collapse into another person's narrative, because you've written your own. And this is the kind of man a woman may be drawn to with overwhelming intensity, because he offers no false security, no false promises, just pure presence. And in that presence, she will either evolve or recoil, not because you made her feel something, but because you reminded her of what she's forgotten in herself. And in the deepest sense, the mirror you hold is not just of strength, clarity, or peace. It's a mirror of possibility, and some people are terrified of seeing what they could become, because it shames them for what they've settled for. And this is why so many deep connections die not from conflict, but from reflection. Because when the initial glow fades and the mirror becomes too sharp, too honest, too raw, it's easier to run than to face it. So your power is not in keeping her, not in fixing her, but in remaining yourself, letting her go if she needs to go, staying centered if she stays, and never becoming who she needs you to be at the cost of who you actually are. Because the man who mirrors her missing self without trying to rescue her is the man who gives her the greatest gift of all, the opportunity to find herself, not in you, but because of you. Number 2, you match her unconscious fantasy. Every woman, regardless of her background, her status, her education, or her intelligence, carries within her a subconscious image of the ideal man. Not necessarily the ideal partner in the practical sense, but the man who represents the feelings she associates with safety, love, or freedom or power. And this image isn't built overnight. It is forged quietly over years by 1,000 subtle moments, like the first time she felt protected by a male figure, or the first time she was ignored and longed for attention, or the quiet loneliness of childhood when she wished someone would understand her without asking her to speak. And this image gets shaped by books she read, movies she watched, the tone in her father's voice when he was calm or angry, the thrill she felt for the teacher who never noticed her, the way an older boy walked confidently across a room, or even a memory so buried she doesn't consciously remember it anymore, but her nervous system does. And this collection of emotions, signals, facial expressions, tones, energies, it forms a blueprint, an unconscious template of the kind of man she is drawn to on a primal level. And then, one day, she meets you, and without knowing why, without any logical checklist being fulfilled, her body reacts before her brain catches up. Her breath quickens, her interest sharpens, her voice shifts, and it's not because you're charming or physically ideal. It's because something about your vibe, your energy, the way you enter a room, the sound of your voice, the way you look at her without rushing to speak, the space you hold in silence, the way you don't seek her approval. All of it triggers her internal memory of that forgotten figure. And suddenly, she feels like she's known you for years, like your presence is strangely familiar, and she can't explain it. So she calls it chemistry, fate, soul connection. And while it might feel spiritual or magical, what's actually happening is projection at the highest level. You have activated her fantasy, and now she's no longer seeing you. She's seeing the idea of you that's been living inside her for years. And the most dangerous part about this is that you didn't do anything to deserve it. You just existed, and that existence aligned with an archetype she's been unconsciously waiting for, and suddenly you're no longer yourself. You've been cast as a role in a script she didn't even know she was directing, and you might enjoy it at first. The attention, the admiration, the way she looks at you like you're the answer to everything she's been seeking. But what starts as flattery quickly becomes a prison, because now, whether you know it or not, you are no longer free to be real, because the moment you show something that doesn't fit the character she's given you, irritation, doubt, insecurity, humanity, the fantasy begins to unravel, and she may not even realize why her attraction is fading, or why she's suddenly distant. But it's because the illusion is breaking, and this is the paradox. She doesn't know she was never in love with you. She was in love with what you represented, the father who never said he was proud of her, the mystery man in the book who made her feel alive, the protective energy she never received from the men who should have made her feel safe. And while the world will tell you that you must live up to the pedestal, the truth is, the pedestal is a death sentence for any man who values self-respect, because once you've been idealized, your every mistake becomes betrayal. Your every moment of humanity becomes a flaw, and you'll start feeling like you're walking on eggshells in a relationship that began with fire, and now feels like a slow suffocation. And the mistake most men make is they try to maintain the fantasy. They become performers in their own life, pretending to be who she wants them to be, modifying their tone, their actions, their boundaries to stay inside the role. But every time you do that, you chip away at your own integrity, and that's the moment you begin to lose her and yourself at the same time, because no woman, no matter how much she projects her fantasy onto you, can respect a man who sacrifices his authenticity for approval. And that's why Stoicism is not just a philosophy, it's protection, because when you live by Stoic principles, you understand that you cannot control another's perception, you cannot maintain a fantasy, and you do not exist to fulfill anyone's unconscious needs. And so, instead of chasing validation, you remain still, unmoved, grounded in your values. And this is what separates a man who gets consumed by her ideal and a man who stands as her equal, not because he's better or more powerful, but because he refuses to become an illusion for someone else's. Unresolved emotional void. And when you live like this, you will attract two types of women: those who want to wake up and those who want to keep dreaming, and both will be drawn to you, but only one will stay when the mask falls, because as the relationship deepens, the real test begins. Can she love you as you actually are, not as she imagined you to be, not as the symbol of her unprocessed emotions, but as the man in front of her, with strengths and flaws, discipline and softness, wins and weaknesses? And that test will come the moment you say no, the moment you disagree, the moment you don't mirror her old fantasy. And in that moment, you'll see the truth. Does she adjust her expectations and meet you in reality, or does she retreat back into the comfort of her illusion, perhaps with another man, another fantasy? And while that may hurt in the short term, it is a blessing in the long term, because the cost of staying inside someone else's projection is your soul, and no amount of sex, affection, or admiration is worth that price. And so, you must ask yourself, would I rather be loved for who I am, or worshipped for who I'm not? Because worship always turns to resentment when the illusion breaks. And if you've ever been told you've changed when all you did was show your humanity, then you know exactly what I mean. And it's tempting to go back, to try to re-become the fantasy, to dim parts of yourself to be loved again. But that is the path of quiet, emotional suicide. And the world is filled with men who did just that, who now walk through life unsure of who they are, wondering why they feel hollow even in the arms of someone who once called them everything. And if that's not who you want to become, then you must be brave enough to let the fantasy die. Because only when the fantasy dies can real love begin. The kind where two people meet, not to complete each other, but to grow together. Not to play roles, but to live truths. And, ironically, when you stop trying to be the fantasy, you become even more powerful, because now, every word, every silence, every look is coming from your core, and that presence, unfiltered, unflinching, unfazed, is what truly commands respect, because it says, I don't need to be your dream, I am my own reality, and if you want to share it, we grow together, and if not, I lose nothing, because I never gave away what made me a man to begin with. Number 3. You trigger her inner evolution. She didn't plan to change, she planned to connect, to feel something, to experience the high of attraction, maybe even flirt with intimacy. But she never planned for transformation, yet when she met you, her emotional world shifted, and not in a soft, manageable way, but in a deep, disorienting, soul-level way that disrupted her entire perception of who she was, because you weren't just another man with good looks and charm. You were a mirror with depth, a mirror she couldn't escape from, and what you reflected wasn't just beauty or validation, but the parts of herself she had kept buried, ignored, or denied. And when a woman meets a man who holds that kind of energetic and psychological space, she doesn't just fall for him. She unravels, not because he says something poetic or does something romantic, but because his presence alone evokes a kind of inner earthquake, a tectonic shift that forces her to confront her unfinished business, her traumas, her fantasies, her illusions, and most dangerously, her identity. And this confrontation, though subtle at first, grows in intensity, because a man who embodies Stoicism, real Stoicism, not fake indifference or emotional detachment, but the calm power that comes from inner discipline, emotional sovereignty, and the absence of need, becomes the immovable object against which her emotional tides crash. And she can feel it, not in her mind, but in her body, in the way her emotions spike around you, in the tension she feels when she tries to manipulate you and you don't react, when she tries to impress you and you remain unmoved, when she opens up emotionally and you don't collapse into the drama, but simply listen. And in those moments, she senses that she's no longer in control of the narrative, because for most of her life, especially if she's attractive or used to being desired, she's been able to steer interactions, to direct the emotional current through performance or charm or chaos. But you break the script, you disrupt the pattern, and in that disruption, you become the very thing she didn't know she was searching for. A man who can't be seduced by surface, who sees through illusion, and who invites her silently to evolve. And evolution is not comfortable, it is not romantic, and it is not convenient, because it requires ego death, the burning away of identity, the dismantling of all the false structures she's used to survive in a world that never truly saw her. And now she's faced with a choice, to stay small and lose you, or to expand and face herself. And most will not choose expansion, not because they can't, but because they won't, because inner growth is pain dressed in silence. And it takes a rare woman to step into that voluntarily, especially when the trigger for that growth is a man she can't control. And this is why she'll sometimes act out, become erratic, start fights over nothing, try to provoke you, test you endlessly, because she's trying to pull you back into the old emotional framework, where she feels safe, where she knows the rules, where she can label you, define you, and therefore contain you. But when you don't respond the way every other man did, when you don't flinch, justify, collapse, or retaliate, she realizes you're not in her reality, you're in your own. And that realization is terrifying, because it means she has to either join you in your reality or retreat back to hers. And this is where the power lies, not in dominance, not in control, but in your refusal to abandon your center. Because a man who can hold his ground in the storm of emotional chaos without suppressing his truth or attacking hers becomes the lighthouse in her hurricane, the point of reference in her sea of confusion. And if she's ready, she'll step toward the light, not because you begged, persuaded, or proved yourself, but because your presence makes staying the same feel unbearable. And now she begins to shift, subtly, slowly, awkwardly at first. Her tone changes, her walls soften, her games stop. Not because she's scared to lose you, but because she begins to see herself. And in that seeing, love becomes possible, but only if she lets go of the parts of her that only knew how to survive through manipulation, control, and fantasy. And that's not a small ask, because for many women, those traits aren't just habits. They're survival strategies developed from abandonment, betrayal, or environments where being real wasn't safe. So don't mistake her hesitation or resistance as lack of interest. Often, it's terror, because you don't just make her feel. You make her question everything she thought she knew. And that's why so many women who deeply feel your energy disappear, ghost, or lash out. Not because you hurt them, but because you awakened them. And awakening is often met with rejection before it's met with gratitude. And if you don't understand this, you'll start believing you're too intense, or too deep, or too much. and begin diluting your essence to be more digestible. But never do that, because your essence is not the problem. It's the medicine, and medicine isn't supposed to taste like candy. It's supposed to heal, and healing often hurts. So stand firm, not out of arrogance, but out of service to truth. Because the truth is this: the most transformative relationships aren't built on ease and comfort, but on the fire of mutual evolution. And that fire is lit the moment you stop playing roles and start being real. And the more real you are, the more she'll either rise to meet you or run to protect her ego. And both outcomes are victories, because you're not here to be adored. You're here to embody your truth. And if she's drawn to that truth, let her stay. And if she's repelled by it, let her go, because your purpose is not to be chosen by every woman. It's to be known by the right one. And the right one won't need you to shrink, explain, or perform, because she won't see you as a project, savior, or God. She'll see you as a man, one who triggered her evolution not through control, but through unwavering presence. And that presence, rooted in Stoic philosophy, is what makes you powerful, because the Stoic doesn't impose. He inspires, he doesn't react. He observes, he doesn't chase. He attracts, not through tricks, but through truth. And that truth is rare, which is why the women who feel it often run from it before they run toward it. But that's not your burden. Your job is to stay aligned, stay centered, and never compromise your integrity for temporary attention. Because when you live this way, even if she doesn't stay, you'll have done your job. Not as her boyfriend, but as her catalyst. The man who walked in without warning, disrupted the illusion, and walked out unchanged. Not because you didn't care, but because you cared too much to lie. And in that truth, you become unforgettable. Not for your charm, your money, or your looks, but for your impact. The kind of impact that echoes in her soul long after you're gone. The kind that makes her question every man after you, not in comparison, but in contrast, because none of them triggered her to grow. And now that she's tasted evolution, settling will feel like slow death. And maybe she'll reach back out. Maybe she won't. But by then, you'll be too far gone. Not because you moved on in bitterness, but because you moved forward in purpose. Because once you realize your presence alone is powerful enough to alter someone's life, you stop trying to prove it. You just live it. And that, above all else, is what makes you unshakable. If you've listened this far, you already know. Most men have been lied to. They've been trained to seek approval, to be needed, to perform like actors on a stage they never auditioned for. But you are not here to be chosen. You are here to choose. You are not here to be decoded by women. You are here to understand yourself so deeply that no projection, no illusion, no craving for admiration can ever shake your center. And this is where Stoicism becomes not a mindset, but your armor. You stop chasing fantasies. You stop becoming what she imagines. You become what is real. Because no matter how deeply a woman is drawn to your confidence, your mystery, your masculine calm, the man who holds his frame while the world spins around him is the man who can't be replaced. Not because he begged to be loved, but because he loved his own peace more than her approval. And in that stillness, in that self-honesty, you don't just attract her, you awaken her. And that's the rarest kind of love. One built not on fantasy, but on truth. If this message hit something in you, don't just click away. Don't scroll past the truth you've been waiting your whole life to hear. Comment, "I choose truth over illusion," if you're ready to break the cycle for good. Support this channel, not for vanity, but because every man who hears this changes. Every man who wakes up becomes unshakable. Every man who sees clearly sets thousands free just by living differently. Subscribe, share this message, help it reach men who are being destroyed by projection and false connection. Support the mission, stand for truth. And if you walk this path, If you choose stoic presence over performance, you won't need her to stay, because you'll finally know who you are when she leaves.